What is going on, everybody? I'm starting a new series where I analyze action game combat mechanics, from the concepts to controls and implementation to enemy encounters and boss designs. And today on the table is recently released Star Wars Jedi Survivor, action game by Respawn set up in the period during the Empire's rule between the events of Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. Game is critically acclaimed and aside from disastrous performance on PC port, has mostly positive feedback across the board. But does combat mechanics of Jedi Survivor hold on its own, or is it one of weaker components of the game? Let's find out.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game!
It is obvious as night and day that the previous game Fallen Order was aiming for an experience similar to Sekiro, where the main goal in most of the fights is to break enemy posture. You alternate attacks and blocks in quick succession, and perfect parries also deal posture damage. These similarities will lead to inevitable comparison of those two games, because Sekiro has pretty much set the bar here. This concept by its nature takes away from the ability to express yourself in the fight. Very likely you will be too occupied with hitting tiny parry windows, but this rhythmic feel can provide satisfaction of its own. To produce this feeling, the enemy's design is super important, and well, unfortunately I can't call it a complete success on the side of the Jedi Survivor, but we will get to it later. Now let's go through some details of the implementation. The biggest distinction between Sekiro and Star Wars Jedi is the reward of breaking posture. While Jedi enemies' posture bar on average is significantly smaller, their reward is much smaller as well. In Sekiro, a broken posture of the enemy resulted in an immediate death blow, allowing it to insta-kill regular enemies or advance boss fight to the next phase, regardless of the remaining health. In Jedi, broken posture only stuns an enemy, allowing to land a couple of guaranteed hits. It may sound balanced, but ultimately will later lead to some problems in regular encounters. Another point I wanted to have here is difficulty settings. Difficulty in this game affects parry windows, which in my opinion is not a great decision. It makes transition between difficulties much harder, forcing the player not just play cleaner and adapt new strategies, but to reset his reference points for parries and develop reflexes. For example, in Sekiro, if a player decides to take on Kura's charm, he will take chip damage for every missed parry, which will force cleaner play. But because it does not impact timings, players' developed reflexes will still be applicable. Or in God of War, when players transition to higher difficulty, enemies get more HP and damage, but most importantly, it makes them more aggressive. This will force players to play cleaner and increase awareness of the surroundings, but again, all developed reflexes will still serve players well. Approaches like those provide smooth progression between difficulties, allowing the player to increase it and build his new skills on top of existing ones. In the Jedi series, changing the difficulty might mean throwing away half of what you have learned about the game, and it could be very demotivating. All the above may render the core concept of the combat mechanics ineffective, leading to players prioritizing dodging and running around instead. And this is where I want to talk about players' posture. Same as enemies' posture, players' posture in Star Wars Jedi is much smaller compared to Sekiro. Penalties for the broken posture are very similar, stunning players' character for a short amount of time, exposing them to attacks. Unfortunately, this makes tactics of running around and dodging even more compelling in Jedi games. Another big difference is in how posture is restored. I am really sorry guys for all the comparison to Sekiro, but this is what developers did to themselves by going for such a playstyle. So, in Sekiro, to restore posture faster, player had to stay with block up. And because it meant being stationary, players could do it only for a short period of time. In the Star Wars Jedi series, it is the other way around. Holding block will slow down the rate with which posture is restored, again promoting running around and dodging before you get your posture back, which is in my opinion not the greatest thing. However, there is a change made in Survivor that in my opinion elevates core mechanics and make it way more engaging. especially in boss fights. You see, in Sekiro, when a player parried the attack, he still received a portion of posture damage. So in long boss fights, even being pinch perfect could lead you to a filled posture bar, and when it is full, parry would still prevent it from being broken, but any missed parry will immediately expose you. So regardless of how clean the player is going, the game will ask the question if he wants to play it safe, create distance and restore some of posture, or if he wants to risk it for a biscuit. Because ultimately the majority of casual players will choose a safer path, for the majority of the players it would mean breaking the combat flow. It is not too bad, but the developers of the Jedi series made an attempt to eliminate it. In Fallen Order, the recovery rate of player posture is so high that basically if at the end of the boss combo it is not broken, it will be full before the next one starts. Just look at it. This is crazy. In this case, why risk parrying? Especially when the reward is not that high. Survivor posture recovery rate is not that high, and considering the chunks of it taken by enemies' attacks, being careless will cause it to break very fast. To compensate, the survivor returns a big portion of posture back on successful parries. This increases the defensive value of the parry and creates this tug-of-war game where your posture meter goes up and down, making every landed perfect parry much more satisfying. Majority of reviewers mark the gameplay absolutely the same as the previous game, ignoring this small incremental, but in my opinion impactful change that maintains the flow of the combat but highlights your knowledge of the enemy. Speaking of small incremental changes, push forward. Modern action games design is adopting a push forward concept where the majority of attacks are coming with steps toward the enemy. This approach renders the battlefield more flowing and dynamic and eliminates the frustration of constant need to manually move towards the enemy without increasing reach of the weapon. And this step was tiny in Fallen Order, almost absent. I can't really count how many times the following scenario happened. I parried an enemy, broke his posture, and then it would be logical that if I just stun the enemy who just attacked me, I should be able to attack him back, right? Wrong. I pressed the attack button and can't swing his lightsaber in the air without reaching the enemy. Well, I am happy to report that this step now exists in Jedi Survivor. Yes, sometimes you still can't reach the enemy who you just parried, but this is more up to the design of the specific enemies rather than generic problem across the board, and I'm going to get to those enemies' designs later in the video, believe that. Overall, those are small incremental changes in core mechanics rather than complete redesign, but in my opinion a very welcome one. And the reviewer is not mentioning those saying that the combat did not improve at all since Fallen Order. It's quite unfair to the game. Is it enough of improvement? Well, I gave you my findings and this is for you to decide. All the above is about interaction of character with game elements. Player still needs an interface to tell the character to perform those actions. Perfect controls in the vacuum will provide a transparent layer where the player eventually stops thinking about buttons he is pressing, but only about actions the character performs. Of course, this is an unattainable goal, but some games came closer to it than the others. Unfortunately, Jedi Survivor is not that close. You probably could hear from different YouTube reviewers about the game being a bit junky, but no one cared to explain what exactly it means. What are the reasons for this junkiness? I cannot speak for those people, but let me try to explain where I think Jedi Survivor falls short in the controls department. Problem number 1, lock-on and camera. There are a bunch of problems with lock-on in this game. Range of lock-on in this game is too short. It should never be shorter than the boss arena, but it is. It constantly falls off when it really shouldn't, like almost any QTE will cancel your lock-on. Sometimes it ignores the target at all. It also doesn't really care where on your screen are your enemies. If you have someone in your peripheral vision slightly closer than someone you are directly looking at, it will lock on a closer target and will instantly rotate your camera there. Worst part, you won't be able to switch lock-on to the target you initially wanted because it was slightly further and won't be on your screen anymore. But those are actually quite regular offenders. You can find those across different games, so it is not so bad. Except one. Lock-on decides there is nothing to lock on, it will rotate the camera in the direction the character is looking at. Multiple times I found myself in a situation where I pressed lock on hoping to lock on the enemy. The game decided that my enemies who are already shooting hell out of me are too far and rotate my camera facing away. Because that is how Cal was oriented at this moment. This one was especially annoying. You can say that I can play without lock-on. The problem is it doesn't really work in this game. You see, when game supports play without lock-on, it does this snapping of a character to the target. If your character moves toward the enemy, if this enemy is within the arc in front of the character. God of War does it. Some games are designed to be played without lock-on, like beat-em-ups, Batman or Spider-Man, and of course one of my beloved games, Ghost of Tsushima. There is no such thing in Star Wars Jedi series. Those games are unplayable without lock-on. Camera starts doing some wildest shit, but then when you face an enemy, if you're just slightly offline, and if your attack is vertical, you will miss and will end up with the enemy on your side. Problem number 3, inconsistent input queue. How it works in most of the games and majority of Jedi Survivor game, whenever you perform an input, it gets queued, and as soon as the previous action is executed, it will execute the next one in the queue. Queues have lengths, and some of the actions you can queue more than one, like basic attack, you can press attack 3 times, and second and third attack will happen. And of course there are actions that will cancel everything in the queue, for example, dodge. However, on some occasions, the game didn't provide consistent handling of the queue. Like when you press the force ability button in the air, sometimes it will execute this ability right after landing, and sometimes it won't. But to the game's credit, it didn't happen too often and potentially could be caused by performance issue in those particular moments. Apart from that, it handles the queue quite well. But just those little moments were a bit annoying. All in all, none of those problems are deal breakers, but combine them together and you get what some people refer as a junky experience. Jedi Survivor gives the player 5 different stances to play with: single blade, dual wielding, blaster stance, and heavy cross guard. As much as I would like to give you some of my thoughts on each stance, unfortunately I won't be able to talk a lot about the blaster stance. And the reason for this is the bug. I used to play with attack on R1 or RB if we talk Xbox controller, so I was playing Jedi Survivor with custom control mapping. Little I knew that blaster shot doesn't work if mapped to any button except the default one. Hilarious. If I had an Edge controller, I could remap on the controller side and swap profiles, but I don't have one. And because I already went through half of the game, I decided not to bother adopting again, but just to play further, hoping that the bug will be fixed soon. Well, I got my platinum trophy. It is also almost a month after the game release, and bug is still there. But enough of me bitching, let's go through what stances provide. Single blade stance is the one player starts the game with. Seemingly the most generic stance is in fact one of the most effective in my opinion. It is fast, animations are not super long, so it is the most optimum choice if you often find yourself in a situation where you need to cancel the attack and dodge or block. Your posture recovers with fairly fast rate. Force attack is just a horizontal, fairly slow swing, not very impressive. It becomes slightly more useful with upgrades when you hold the button for longer, resulting in a long-reach thrust attack. The coolest ability is on block plus attack button that will close the gap to the enemy, and with upgrades it can even dash Cal to the enemy in mid-air. Gap closer is by far the most useful one for a single blade in my opinion, but overall you can never go wrong with it. Dual blade is obtained very early in the game, even before you have your first real boss fight. The game kinda advertises this one as a defensive option with good crowd control, but to be honest I never liked it much. My biggest problem with it has quite a long animations that leave you exposed for way too long, and not providing any kind of a crazy damage output apart from a couple of force abilities. With enemies as aggressive as they are in Grandmaster difficulty, I rarely found it more effective than anything else. Even the unique ability to deflect all projectiles after the first one doesn't sell this one to me. Dual wielding stance is also pretty early. It is received during the third phase of Ninth Sister fight, and while I really like the stance for boss fights, I need to let you know that this stance has a trap. Equipping this stance reduces the size of the posture bar, making it a kind of a high risk, high reward stance. But if you know about bosses' long-winded attacks, you can use the ability of this stance to parry those and help to ease the pressure on your posture bar. It also has a great ability where you do this cross slice and then fall back. But be warned, this stance is advertised as the fast stance in the game, and it feels like it. It lands a lot of hits dealing very solid damage, and helps you to recover tons of the force. The problem is those sequences of attacks are not a single attack each. Every press of the button causes multiple attacks, and even though those attacks seem fast, those non-cancelable animations are terribly long, especially combo finishers. Just look at it. All those attacks are the result of a single button press, and if you do it, unless one of those attacks is parried by the enemy and interrupted, you are stuck in it. So if you ever found Cal swinging despite you pressing dodge like crazy, this is probably why. Blaster stance. As I said, I haven't played it a lot, but from what I have seen, it helps to create constant pressure on the enemies with the blaster, plus it helps with flying enemies, which are very annoying. Can't say much more, unfortunately. Let me know in the comments what you think about the blaster stance. And last but not least, cross guard stance. It is my favorite stance because heavy and slow weapons hitting like a truck is my playstyle, and it is also a bit of a disappointment when it comes to lightsaber duel fights. You see, a lot of enemies who can parry have this mechanic where they can cancel the attack to parry your attack. If the game registers your attack earlier than a certain point, this creates this dynamic flow where you parry, then you start attacking the enemy forced to block parry your attack. You keep attacking the enemy till he either parries or dodges to drain his posture bar, and when you see an enemy parried or dodged, you go on defensive again, and so on. With crossguard being as slow as it is, enemies register players' attacks too late, so it means they won't cancel their attack animation. This leads to exchanging hits if the attack connects first, or even worse, they hit first and your attack is interrupted. Even though I found it a very fun stance. When you find an opening, God, it's rewarding. Not all bosses have this block parry mechanic, so naturally this stance is good against those who don't parry you, like creature bosses or Ravis. It is absolutely perfect against Ravis. I also found force attacks of this stance are very useful. Upgraded regular force attack swings far, closes the gap to the enemy. It as fast as a single blade one, but it deals so much more damage. Costs a lot of force though. The overhead chop costs less, deals a bit less damage, but deals the same amount of posture damage. And the wave you can send from jump, this is top tier. It doesn't deal much damage, but it sends enemies away, and if you hit a block, it takes half of boss's posture. It's really fun. Because stance is very slow, meaning you won't be able to regenerate much force with attacks. And force attacks are very demanding. If you decide to play with it, I would highly recommend buying a perk from Z that halves your force meter, but adds regeneration over time. Tip: even though force attack of crossguard consumes tons of force, to use it you need just the minimum amount. So for optimization, try to use your most expensive attack as soon as you recover the minimum amount of the force. Anyways, this is a quick overview of the stances. I think the playstyle is different enough to justify existence of all of them, but not distinct enough to have the chore of cycling through all 5 of them. Stance swapping takes time, but of course there are ways to speed it up. Inputting different stance during attack will change stance almost immediately. You also can change stance during the jump. For example, if I have to use jump to evade the ground slam, I like to swap weapons for crossguard to send the wave towards the enemy. So I would say there are some ways to change the attacks of different stances, but I wouldn't say there are that many of efficient ways to do this. Every aspect I described above is just the components forming the entire experience. And the last component that cements all pieces together is enemies. Enemy encounters and boss battles can play off the advantages of combat concept and to make the gameplay truly shine, or it can highlight all the problems making the entire experience unsatisfying or even annoying. And as regular encounters in Jedi Survivor go, I think it mostly did what it needed to do, but there are some exceptions. Same as Sekiro, Jedi Survivor combat is not very well suited for encounters with multiple enemies, especially when those enemies are elite. Because enemies show a very high level of aggression on higher difficulty, you can't really rely on parry, which is one of the main game mechanics. So you end up running around, deflecting some projectiles now and then and trying to separate enemies to pick them one by one. This is the most effective strategy and it's not really fun. In Sekiro we had stealth to deal with the situation, and while it was okay, it never elevated the gameplay. Jedi Survivor has something much better, Force abilities. Force abilities allow you to get rid of some enemies immediately, crowd control enemies, split enemies. It is an amazing tool to reduce multiple enemies fight back to a more manageable situation. The cool part, skills for Force upgrades really make you feel more powerful with character progression, thanks to those encounters. Doing so not by simple scaling, but by adding new qualities to the Force abilities. In general, I want to give a credit to progression design here. It is not deep, and it is fairly simple and doesn't provide flexibility of the build, yet it manages to highlight the difference in character strengths as you level up. And a lot of this is thanks to encounters and enemies. Well, majority of the encounters. Some of the encounters truly made me rage. Like the fight on this platform. Here you have to deal with multiple waves of enemy, and at the beginning you are deflecting, slicing droids, using force powers. It is fun, but then in the end the game throws 2 sentry droids of different types your way, and it sucks. Big days. There are no force abilities that can help you to get rid of them fast. You don't have your ultimate upgrade yet. Because they are completely out of sync, you can't parry a chain of attacks from the one with staff that is required to cut his arm off. The other guy will shoot you at the least convenient time or will perform one of unblockable attacks. So it is very hard to fight them head on and be stylish. I still would try it, but the failure results in going through all the waves before, again, and again, and again. And I got so tired of going through all those waves that I decided, nah, I'm going to kill those guys in the most safe way. And the most safe way is running around, waiting till they split, perform 1-2 attacks, depending on the stance, and run around again. What I'm trying to say is that when you face multiple elite enemies in this game, it becomes exponentially harder and not in a fun way. From the enemy types, I wanted to mention the absolutely disastrous and not fun design of BXs and raiders with jetpacks, with their strategies of jumping around, striking from distance, and immediately moving away. Fighting those in the pack is incredibly frustrating, but even in one-on-one, those are not fun at all. They're not hard, it is just all you do is chasing them around. Who thought this design was fun? On the other side of the spectrum, I would like to mention Magna Guards and moved from previous game Perth Troopers with Electro stuff. While those are kinda elite enemies, have solid posture, meter, and HP, fighting them both one-on-one and in the bunch seems fair. You actually feel like you are actually focusing on parry and breaking posture rather than chasing bastards across the battlefield. Enemies like this are highlighting the best parts of Jedi combat design. I wish we had more Magna Guards and less BXs. Boss battles are one of the most enjoyable parts of the game for myself, if they are done right. Interesting bosses with complicated attack patterns that you solve like a puzzle, learning all the moves, understanding telegraphing of those moves, finding counters and openings, and in the end, putting all of it together in smooth and flawless combat is one of the most rewarding experiences a player can get, and imprint it in his memory for a long time. Hrolfing from God of War Ragnarok, Melania from Elden Ring, Ishin from Sekiro, Virgil from DMC5, and of course Sigrun from God of War 2018. Those are the masterclasses in boss design we had pleasure to witness in recent years. Jedi Survivor in my opinion doesn't provide anything to add to this list, and here's why. First of all, the majority of the bosses in this game are laughably easy, even on highest difficulty. There are a couple of exceptions and I will talk about them later in the spoiler section. But I killed more than half of the bosses on the first try, I defeated 90% of the bosses in under 3 tries, and from the rest there were only a couple really hard bosses. The other created difficulty simply by throwing multiple already known bosses into a single fight. This is not the way to create a hard boss. This is just so lazy and the result is not satisfying. And when I'm talking about defeating half of the bosses first try, I'm not bragging here, I am far from top tier player. For comparison with the latest games, in Ragnarok the average story boss took me around 10 tries, or I was saved by generous checkpoint systems. Even Bjorn killed me on my first playthrough, and I spent hours defeating Na for the first time. Melania in Elden Ring was so tough for me that I decided to go and level up a bit before getting back to her. Jedi Survivor contains nothing close to those challenges, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind story bosses being on the easier side and tough ones being sprinkled across the world as challenges for most dedicated players. But no, this is the difficulty of the bosses across the board. Even more, the most interesting and challenging bosses are actually part of the main story. I want to go through the types of the bosses existing in this game and want to highlight some of best and worst examples. There will be some minor spoilers in the beginning and some major spoilers in the end. I will give a big spoiler warning before getting into big spoilers. First type of bosses are risky elite enemies, maybe with one extra move. Do I need to say it is a terribly lazy approach? None of them are too hard, most of them have a good base, so I don't mind it too much. Also, maybe I'm giving devs too much credit, but the rigged door technician looks like a joke showing that the game is self-aware. Next type is giant creature bosses. With the exception of Rancor, I hate those guys. Their attacks are terribly telegraphed, they break your posture in no time, their grapple attacks, hitboxes don't make any fucking sense. Again, the best way to defeat those guys is running around and waiting for the opening. Combat flow is completely broken. It is safe to say I wouldn't mind if there were no creature boss fights except Rancor in this game. Next type is saber fights, and it will have some serious spoilers to the game, so if you want to avoid them, go to the final thoughts section. There are two subtypes of saber fights, actual force users and raiders with blades. Raiders with blades are an absolute joke. Unless they are swarming you, those fights are ridiculously easy. There are only 4 force users you will encounter in the game: Ninth Sister, 3 fights with Dagon Gera, Dark Lord himself, and final boss Bode. Ninth Sister is pretty much an entry boss. She has a couple new moves compared to previous games, but overall she is pretty easy, and I have no problem with that. First boss fight shouldn't be too hard. Then you fight Dagon 3 times. First fight after you free Dagon from the capsule is pretty easy. He has only a couple of moves and all of them are pretty easy to counter. Second fight is a different story. Now he has longer combos with different timings, and here comes my big problem. Now I completely understand that this could be my issue, my personal issue, rather than the issue with the game, but in saber duels I really struggle to get the read on the attack. Some attacks from both Dagon and Bode look so similar in the beginning that I literally cannot say which one it will be in the end. I got better at it in the but just the concept of looking at tiny differences in the attack went up to understand what is going to hit you didn't seem much of fun. Third fight adds some flavor to his attacks, and he also summons as in the last phase. Fortunately, those adds die easily. Fight feels longer, but if you master the second fight, you won't have any problems. What you will likely have a problem with is FPS drops. I played on PS5, there were some issues with performance, nothing near to the PC problems I have seen on other videos, but all of the boss battles went smoothly. Oh, but this one. I had FPS drops way below 30, and as you can imagine, hitting the tiny parry windows on Grandmaster difficulty with those FPS drops is an incredibly hard task. And it's a shame because with all the complaints, Dagon fight are one of the better fights in the game. The final boss fight with Bode is the best saber duel in the game in my opinion. It has a very nice flow to it. You parry, you break his posture, you manage your posture. Mostly it highlights all the good parts of combat. From annoying parts, I would like to mention when he blocks your attack and then instead of parrying he dodges sideways and takes a quick shot at you with his blaster. If he does any other attack after dodge, it is fine, but if he does this shot, it is close to impossible to counter it because you are very likely stuck in long animation and this shot is really quick. Though it is mostly a problem for no damage runs because even on Grandmaster difficulty this shot deals very little damage and causes minimum stagger. Overall, I think it's a massive improvement compared to Trilla in the previous game. I didn't like final boss fight in Fallen Order at all. Also, I wanted to quickly mention the fight with Vader. You fight the Vader as Seer, not as Cal. I think Vader's moves are really interesting and cool. I think the base, the design of this combat is really cool. It has very well telegraphed attacks. Like it has nice flow. The problem is I have with this one is that for some reason, even though I played on Grandmaster difficulty, game decided to give me as giant parry windows. So this somehow made this fight way too easy comparing to others. I'm not sure why was it like this. Why couldn't we get the regular Grandmaster parry windows in this fight as well? But nevertheless, it was a pretty interesting one. I had fun with it. But by far the best fight in the game doesn't fall in any of those categories. Ravis, he is aggressive as hell in the second phase. You feel like you are surviving continuous relentless assault, but his moves are well telegraphed and windows for attacks are clear. Ravis is the boss where the combat design of this game is at its best. Oh, I wish we had more of those. Brilliant fight. The only thing that stops me from pulling Ravis on the same shelf with all the top fights in other games is quite a poor moveset, and it is a weird feeling. From one side I wanted Ravis to have more moves, from the other I understand that it will make him much harder, which could be not the best idea for the story boss in the middle of the game. Anyways, I wanted to have a quick mention about bounty hunters. Shields guys and robots are fine, but guys with pistols and jetpacks are complete bullshit. They just shoot you and run away. Throwing multiple hunters in one fight is just lazy. Cage is essentially a glorified bounty hunter with pistols. Didn't like this fight. I also have done it under 5 tries, which is very weird, because I thought those bounties were supposed to be ultimate challenges like Valkyries or Berserkers in God of War, but no. All those fights are laughably easy, with the exception of Trio fight and Nova Garon. I did all of them the first try, and the cage fight is not satisfying. I haven't done it no damage, but to be honest, I have no intention. It just doesn't seem interesting, unfortunately. Same as with Fallen Order, Survivor has a decent core concept of combat mechanics betrayed by the enemy designs. Mostly boss designs. I am not saying this game has bad combat, it is perfectly fine and will keep you going long enough. Combat is not very deep, but it undergoes good quality transformation with character progression, where you can have more fun with different force abilities and doesn't overstay its welcome in the end. It has a couple of fun bosses that deserve the attention, but if you're expecting top tier action game experience on the level of God of War, Sekiro or Devil May Cry, you probably will be disappointed. This concludes Star Wars Jedi Survivor Combat Analysis. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.
It's all about the game and how you play it. All about control. And if you can take it, it's all about your debt. And if you can pay it, it's all about pain. And who's gonna make it? I am the game. You don't wanna play me. I am